Why do we sleep? Every night we disappear. We lie down in bed, close our eyes, and the world simply ceases to be. We are no longer in it. There's no time, no tasks, no name. We fall into an emptiness. But this is not death. It is sleep. And every evening, without questioning why, we release our control. We surrender ourselves to something greater than our consciousness. We allow ourselves to be vulnerable, trusting our body and brain to do what is necessary. But what is it exactly that needs to be done? This is a journey into the heart of sleep. Together, we will explore how the brain works at night and why sleep is not simply rest, but a precise and vitally important function of our organism. We will understand. Why does the brain need sleep, and why does it keep working while we are turned off? What are the phases of sleep and how do they follow one another? Why do we have dreams and how can they be useful? What causes insomnia, and how is sleep connected to memory, immunity, and emotions? And, finally, what would happen if we didn't sleep at all? Lay your head on the pillow, make yourself comfortable. And if you fall asleep before the end, it simply means everything is working as it should. Let us begin with the simplest yet most important question. Why do we sleep? Every evening, we willingly disappear. We disconnect from our affairs, our thoughts, our anxieties, and fall into something strange, formless, unconscious, yet necessary. Sleep. It arrives without explanation and with almost no resistance, as if we are obeying some deep primal programming. And although we do this every day, few of us can seriously explain why. At first glance, everything seems simple. We sleep to get rested. Everyone says so. Everyone is sure that it's obvious. But if you ask a clarifying question, what does it actually mean to be rested? The answer begins to crumble. What specifically happens to the body and brain when we are rested? Where is the feeling of being well rested stored? Why does everything fall apart without sleep, while after a normal night we feel as if we've returned to ourselves? And why do we start fumbling for words and getting irritated after just one nearly sleepless night? The truth is that most of us don't know why we sleep. We just do it. And while we do, the brain is hard at work, because sleep is not rest, it is a hidden labor. Sleep is not a pause, but a second shift. There's a common misconception that the brain falls asleep along with us, as if someone turned off the lights and everything is empty until morning. In reality, it's the opposite. The very moment you stop controlling anything, the brain starts its night shift. It switches its focus from the external world to the internal one. Everything that was set aside during the day, unprocessed thoughts, emotions, fragments of events, sensations, is now sent for processing. It's as if after an office closes, the technical support staff comes in. They won't be taking calls, but they have their own work. Important, quiet, almost invisible. During the day, the brain reacts. At night, it analyzes. During the day, it decides what to do. At night, what to keep. These are two different modes, and both are necessary for you to be you. Why does the body need sleep? When we fall asleep, the body doesn't just rest. It enters a recovery mode. Our temperature drops, the pulse slows, blood pressure decreases, muscles relax, the load on the heart lessens, and digestion pauses. At this moment, hormones that are barely active during the day begin to work. For example, growth hormone, which is important not only for children, it helps repair tissues, heal micro-injuries, and maintain bones and skin. And it is at night that it is released most actively. The immune system also kicks in. Studies show that a full night's sleep is directly linked to resistance to infections, while sleep deprivation, on the contrary, weakens the immune system. If you fall ill after a tough week at work, the cause may not be a virus, but 3 short nights in a row. And why does the brain need sleep? This is where it gets most interesting, because the brain, in fact, needs sleep more than anything. First, for memory. Everything you learned during the day, what you read, heard, understood, is not yet true knowledge at the moment of perception. It's like a rough draft. And only at night does the brain open the stack of papers and decide what is worth saving and what should be thrown away. Second, for emotions. We experience more than we have time to process. Joy, anxiety, resentment, fear. All of this remains within us if not processed. And so, at night, the brain takes these emotional files and sorts them, calming, erasing the unnecessary, and transforming acute feelings into a background hum. It's amazing, but even by simply getting a good night's sleep, we often feel calmer, as if someone has digested the day for us. Third, for creativity. It is at night that the brain connects unrelated elements, draws conclusions, makes discoveries, and sees unconventional paths. The dreams of Mendeleev and Kekulé were not fiction. They are real examples of the brain's nightly intellectual work. Did you know that during the REM phase of sleep, brain activity can be even higher than when you are awake? That is, you are sleeping, but your brain is as if it drank a coffee and went to write a dissertation. And if you don't sleep, a gradual system failure begins. First, mild irritability and a fog in your head. Then, attention, memory, and speech worsen. After a full day without sleep, perception is disturbed and disorientation may occur. After 3 days, hallucinations are possible. Sleep deprivation affects everything from your skin to your metabolism. It provokes hormonal imbalances, increases the risk of diabetes, reduces fertility, and makes you more anxious, forgetful, and vulnerable. It weakens your capacity for empathy and even impairs your risk assessment. You literally begin to think less effectively than you could. Did you know that the officially recorded record for wakefulness is 11 days? And no, you shouldn't try to repeat it. The subject later said he couldn't remember the last 2 days. And yet, we still think that just 1 night of missed sleep is no big deal. But in essence, 1 sleepless night is like a voluntary microconcussion for the brain. Why did sleep win the evolutionary race? During sleep, a person is helpless, easy to scare, to attack, to rob. They cannot defend themselves. They are not in control. Logic suggests that such a mechanism should have been eliminated by evolution, but instead, sleep has been preserved in all animals, from fish to elephants. This means that the benefits of sleep outweigh its risks. It is so necessary that nature has preserved it even in creatures that have no hands to lock a door or a bed to lie on. Dolphins, for example, sleep with only one hemisphere of their brain at a time. The other one ensures that the animal doesn't drown. Even flies and worms have their own versions of sleep, periods of inactivity during which their brain and body switch to another mode. This is a universal and essential principle. Even deeper, the brain cleans itself during sleep. One of the most amazing discoveries of recent years is the glymphatic system. This is a kind of nightly sanitation system for the brain. During sleep, the brain shrinks like a sponge by up to 60% to create space for fluid to pass through, literally washing out metabolic byproducts, including potentially toxic proteins. This is critically important for preventing neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's disease, and all of this happens only during sleep. During the day, while we are awake, the glymphatic system is almost inactive. In summary, we sleep to remain ourselves. Sleep is not a waste of time, but a biological necessity. It preserves your memory. It stabilizes your mood. It supports the function of all your organs. And most importantly, it brings you back to yourself. Without sleep, we lose what makes us a person: clarity, coherence, attention, emotional balance. Therefore, the question, why do we sleep can be turned around. We sleep so that we do not get lost, so that we do not disappear, so that tomorrow we can be ourselves again. But now for another question. How does the brain even know it's time to sleep? It's not like a sign lights up somewhere that says, "Time to sleep." How does the brain know it's time to sleep? Sleep is a necessary thing, we've understood that. But here's the question. How does the brain know when it's time to shut down? Does it see it in our eyes, or does someone from above press a button? The answer, as always, is both simpler and more complex. The brain relies on numerous signals, and it does so discreetly, automatically, and almost always correctly. Although, of course, there can be glitches. For example, when you fall asleep on a bus for 5 seconds and wake up because your forehead hits the window. So the brain has a built-in regulatory system. It can be compared to a biological navigator that tracks your state every second and decides, all right, it's time for us to assume a horizontal position. Circadian rhythms are built-in biological clocks. Inside each of us, there is a clock, not in a metaphorical sense, but literally. It's built into the brain and operates on a 24-hour cycle. These clocks are called circadian rhythms. They regulate when we feel sleepy and when we feel awake, when hormones are produced, when the body begins to cool down and the brain starts to slow. The main clock is located in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus. It sounds intimidating, but it's just the control panel for our biological time. It receives signals from the eyes and, based on them, understands whether it is light or dark. That is, when it starts to get dark outside, the brain receives a signal, attention, night is approaching, and begins preparing for sleep. Did you know how circadian rhythms were discovered? In the 1960s, scientists in Germany placed volunteers in isolated bunkers without windows, without clocks, without any external cues. The people didn't know what time it was, morning or evening, but they still continued to sleep and wake up on a schedule. Their internal rhythms worked as if by an invisible clock. For most of them, the internal day was about 24 hours, sometimes a little longer. This became the first serious proof that biological rhythms are not a fiction. They are built into us, even if you turn off everything around. Melatonin, the hormone of darkness. The brain doesn't just wait for darkness, it reacts to it. In response to diminishing light, the body begins to produce melatonin, a hormone that triggers the feeling of sleepiness. It is also called the hormone of darkness. Interestingly, melatonin itself does not put you to sleep. It rather creates the conditions for it, lowering body temperature, reducing the levels of wakefulness neurotransmitters, and shifting systems into a prepare for shutdown mode. Did you know that if you sit in front of a bright phone or television screen in the evening, your melatonin levels can be reduced by 2 to 3 times, and your brain simply won't understand that you are already in bed? It will think that it's noon, and you just happen to be in your pajamas. Homeostatic sleep pressure. The longer you are awake, the stronger the pull. There is another mechanism. It's simpler. You could call it a sleep debt. The longer you stay awake, the more debt your body accumulates and the more it demands sleep. This is called homeostatic sleep pressure. It builds throughout the day while you are awake. At some point, the pressure becomes so strong that the brain stops fighting it and gives the command to shut down. In essence, circadian rhythms tell the brain when it's best to sleep, while homeostatic pressure tells it how badly you want to do it. Why is a routine important? If you go to bed and wake up at different times, your biological clocks start to get confused and the body gets lost. The brain doesn't know when to expect melatonin and when to switch on wakefulness. It's like having your alarm clock move to a different time every day. At some point, you just stop trusting it. A disrupted routine can lead to a constant feeling of being drained, decreased concentration, mood swings, and even metabolic problems. Not because it's inherently bad, but because the brain doesn't have time to readjust. That's why a stable sleep schedule is not just some tedious advice from a health magazine. It's a way to explain to your brain when to turn on its night program and when to turn on its day program. Light, food, and movement. Circadian rhythms are influenced by more than just light. For example, food is also a signal. If you have dinner at 11 o'clock at night, your brain will decide that the day is still going. After all, it has received fuel. So why sleep? Physical activity during the day also enhances evening sleepiness. The body receives a signal. The body is tired. It's time to rest. But if you spent the whole day sitting and watching shows, the brain isn't sure you've done anything at all. And finally, light. The more light you get in the morning, the more actively the wakefulness mode is launched. And the darker it is in the evening, the easier it is for the body to switch to sleep mode. In summary, the brain responds to signals, not to willpower. The brain doesn't fall asleep on command. It doesn't obey the phrase, "Okay, time to sleep." It relies on real signals: light, temperature, hormone levels, the time of your last meal, your activity level, and accumulated fatigue. This means that to sleep better, you don't need to force yourself as much as you need to help your brain understand, yes, it's okay now. With no bright screens, with a regular schedule, warm light, a quiet atmosphere, and a sense of a completed day. What is hypnagogia? Why do we jerk just before falling asleep? And why does the brain show us strange images on the border between sleep and wakefulness? The border of sleep. Hypnagogia, images, and twitches. Sleep is not a switch. We don't fall asleep instantly. Between wakefulness and sleep, there is a delicate transitional zone. And this zone is far more interesting than it seems. It is called the hypnagogic state, from the Greek words hypnos, meaning sleep, and agogos, meaning leading, that which leads to sleep. This is what happens to us in the first few minutes of falling asleep, the moment when you are still almost conscious but no longer in control of your thoughts, when strange images, meaningless phrases, and faces you don't know surface, and you suddenly jerk as if you've fallen. Hypnagogia is not sleep, but it's not wakefulness either. It's a border territory where consciousness loses control and the brain begins to shift into its night mode. What does the brain feel on the border of sleep? At the moment of falling asleep, the brain begins to transition from alpha rhythms to theta rhythms, from the waves of calm wakefulness to the waves of initial sleep. The speed of neural impulses drops and their synchrony increases. Imagine that before, there was a crowd of people in your brain talking to each other, and now they are beginning to quiet down and walk in the same direction. Not at once, but gradually. This state is accompanied by a light confusion. You might start thinking about one thing, then suddenly imagine yourself in another place, or hear a voice in your head that wasn't there. The brain begins to produce images, but can't yet hold on to them, and they change like slides in a chaotic projector. What are hypnagogic images? Hypnagogic images are vivid but fleeting, visual, auditory, or bodily sensations that occur as you fall asleep. You might see faces you don't recognize, hear music that doesn't exist, feel as if someone called your name, even though the room is silent, or suddenly see, not with your eyes, but inside your head, a landscape that vanishes if you blink. Did you know that Salvador Dalí used hypnagogia for inspiration? He would deliberately fall asleep with a spoon in his hand, and under his hand he would place a metal plate. As he began to drift into sleep, the spoon would fall, the sound would wake him, and he would immediately write down or sketch what he had seen. Some of his surrealist paintings originated from there. Such images are normal. They are the result of the brain trying out its nightly training, activating visual, auditory, and emotional zones to ensure that the systems are working. It's as if it's running dreams in test mode before switching to the main server. Why do we jerk when falling asleep? Another phenomenon of hypnagogia is the hypnic jerk. This is a sudden twitch of the body as you fall asleep, often with the sensation that you are falling or tripping. It happens because the body and the brain do not fall asleep at the same time. The body is already relaxed, but the brain is still a little active, and at that moment can interpret the sudden loss of muscle tone as a danger. In response, it sends a short impulse to the muscles, just in case, to check if you've fallen. Sometimes this is accompanied by images, as if you've missed a step or jumped off a ladder. All of this is a common physiologically normal effect. Interestingly, such jerks are more common in those who are overtired or have eaten too much before bed. The nervous system simply has fewer resources for a smooth transition, and so it makes a leap to finally enter sleep. Thoughts that are not our own. Many describe the hypnagogic state as a moment when thoughts become foreign. You are lying there, thinking about something of your own, and suddenly a phrase appears that you feel you've heard rather than thought of. Or a feeling arises that you are being led somewhere. This is not a sign of anything mystical. It's just that the cerebral cortex temporarily steps back and internal processes take over. The word attention ceases to work. The brain begins to wander, and this wandering can be completely illogical. You might imagine a lion on a bicycle, but it won't surprise you. In hypnagogia, critical thinking is almost inactive. It's as if it's already asleep while the rest of the brain is not. The transition without a transition. The most surprising thing about hypnagogia is that we never notice when it ends. We remember lying there, thinking. We remember seeing a strange dream, but the moment of transition itself seems to be erased. This is not a lapse, it's the turning off of attention. The brain switches to sleep mode not instantly, but gently, deactivating some areas while activating others. It dims sight, hearing, movement, and internal speech, as if someone were slowly turning off the lights in a room one by one. Why is this important? Hypnagogia is not just an interesting effect. It's part of normal falling asleep. If you can't enter this state, you can't fall asleep. If you are constantly interrupted at this stage, the brain doesn't have time to readjust, and this affects the quality of your sleep. By the way, sleep meditations, visualizations, and breathing techniques all work not through magic, but by enhancing the hypnagogic state. They help you linger on the border of sleep and transition more gently inside. In summary, falling asleep is a journey along the edge. We don't just fall into sleep. We walk along a narrow path between consciousness and the unconscious. And if you listen closely, you can see many amazing things there. Faces, phrases, scenes, movements. Hypnagogia is a brief moment when the brain begins to create and reason steps aside. It's no wonder that this is where the strangest ideas or the deepest dreams are born. The phases of sleep. Why are there several? When we hear the word sleep, we usually imagine something singular. You switch off and you sleep. But that's not quite right. Sleep is not a single mode, but a complex sequence of phases that the brain goes through several times a night. It's as if every night it runs a cycle of technical maintenance. First, it scans, then it repairs, cleans, and archives, and only after that does it move to the creative department where the real nightly magic begins. The phases of sleep are not a poetic invention or a theory. They were discovered thanks to a technology that we all secretly fear a little: electroencephalography, or EEG. As soon as scientists began connecting wires to the heads of sleeping people, it became clear that the brain is not silent during sleep. It lives by its own laws in waves, and each wave signifies a new state. What are the phases of sleep? Modern science divides sleep into two main types: slow wave sleep, or NRM, and rapid eye movement sleep, or REM. In NREM sleep, the brain gradually quiets down, sinking deeper and deeper, reducing activity and restoring the body. In REM sleep, on the contrary, the brain becomes active, dreams appear, emotions and associations come to life, but the body is almost completely paralyzed. One sleep cycle, from drowsiness to the REM phase, lasts about 90 minutes, and there are 4 to 6 such cycles per night. Each cycle seems to repeat the previous one, but with slight changes. At the beginning of the night, there is more deep sleep, and towards the morning, there are more dreams. If you compare it to a play, a night is not one long performance, but several acts of the same play, where the action becomes more vivid and strange with each repetition. Stage 1. The threshold of sleep. This is the very beginning, the transition from wakefulness to sleep. You still feel your body, hear sounds, but you're starting to drift off. In this phase, it's easy to be woken by any noise. It's here that hypnagogic images, jerks, and the feeling of falling occur. The brain produces theta waves. These are slower and more chaotic oscillations that signal attention is weakening, control is being lost. Stage 2. True sleep. If stage 1 can be compared to boarding a train, then stage 2 is when the train has started moving, and you are no longer thinking about the station. Here, your body temperature drops, your heart begins to beat more slowly, and your muscles become almost still. On an EEG, so-called sleep spindles appear, bursts of activity that look like small, rippling peaks. They seem to protect your sleep from external noise, shielding you from sounds and stimuli. In stage 2, a person sleeps deeper than in stage 1, but not so deeply that it's impossible to wake them. This is the longest phase, taking up to half the night. Stage 3. Deep sleep. This is where the real maintenance of the organism begins. The brain operates in the mode of delta waves, very slow, powerful, deep waves. It's as if it has gone into a basement, deep within itself, to attend to matters that require complete silence. What happens in this phase? Growth hormone is released, the glymphatic system, the brain's cleaners, is activated, and the liver, muscles, skin, everything is restored. The immune system is strengthened. Waking someone at this time is almost impossible. If you do manage it, they will be confused, with a heavy head, and unaware of where they are. It's important to know that it is in deep sleep that children grow, the body recovers, and a person truly recharges their strength. Without this phase, it's impossible to feel well rested. Stage 4. REM sleep. This is the strangest and most beloved stage for the brain. Suddenly, brain activity sharply increases, almost to the level of wakefulness, but the body is paralyzed. You cannot move, only your eyes dart rapidly under your eyelids, hence the name, rapid eye movement sleep. What is happening? In the REM phase, dreams appear, not just images, but full-fledged stories. The brain replays important moments of the day, pulls out old memories, and connects them with new ones. Emotions are relived and perhaps processed. Learning, creativity, decision-making, all are consolidated here. An interesting fact, the REM phase is especially long in the morning, which is when dreams are particularly vivid. If you've ever woken up with the feeling that you just watched a real movie, it was likely the end of a REM phase. How does all this alternate? A sleep cycle goes roughly like this: stage 1, then stage 2, then stage 3, back to stage 2, and then REM. This repeats 4 to 6 times a night. With each new cycle, deep sleep, stage 3, shortens, while REM sleep lengthens. This means that in the first half of the night, the body is restored, and in the second half, the brain and emotions are. This is why insomnia in the morning or going to bed late can affect not your physical state, but your mood, memory, and decision-making ability. Why are the phases important? Because they distribute the workload. You can't fix everything at once. The brain does it in parts. Stage 1 releases control. Stage 2 stabilizes. Stage 3 restores the physical body. REM processes experience and shapes personality. If one is disrupted, all of them suffer. It's as if you went to the hospital and only the dermatologist examined you. The other doctors went to sleep. In summary, sleep is not rest. It's a change of tasks. Every night you go through a full cycle from drowsiness to dreaming. Every night the brain works in shifts. Sometimes it repairs, sometimes it digests, sometimes it fantasizes. If everything goes according to plan, in the morning you wake up not just rested, but renewed. And if not, when everything goes wrong, what happens if you disrupt your sleep schedule? Until now, we've talked about sleep as something necessary, beneficial, and finely organized. But now it's time to look at the darker side of the issue. What happens when all of this breaks down? Because sleep is a fickle thing. It works only with a more or less stable rhythm. If there's no rhythm, the brain starts to get lost, systems get confused, and you slowly but surely head not towards a cheerful morning, but towards malfunctions. But first, what is actually considered a disruption? What is a disrupted sleep schedule? A sleep disruption isn't just insomnia. Sometimes you sleep for 8 hours but still feel exhausted. Why? Because it's not just the quantity of sleep that matters, but also its structure, timing, and regularity. Here are the main types of disruptions. Going to bed late, for example, at 3 or 4 in the morning every day. A floating schedule. Today at midnight, tomorrow at 5 in the morning, then at 10 o'clock sharp. Fragmented sleep. You fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep again, and so on all night. Chronic sleep deprivation. You sleep 5 to 6 hours a day thinking you're fine. Compensating on weekends, a week of sleep deprivation, then 12 hours of sleep on Saturday. Ignoring signs of fatigue. You want to sleep, but just one more episode, and it's already 1 in the morning. At first glance, it seems like no big deal. But in reality, it's like trying to charge a phone in jerky bursts. 5 minutes here, an hour there, then fully draining it and plugging it in again. It will turn on, but it won't work well. The consequences for the brain. The brain is one of the most sensitive organs to sleep. Sleep disruptions hit it first. What happens? Attention drops. Even mild sleep deprivation reduces concentration as much as a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. Memory weakens. You have trouble remembering things and, more importantly, retrieving what you need from memory. Speech is impaired. Words get mixed up. You lose your train of thought and you speak more simply. Thinking speed decreases. You spend more time on simple tasks and make mistakes. Emotions intensify, and not in a good way. Anger, anxiety, irritability. And if sleep deprivation is systematic, even your risk assessment changes. You literally become worse at making decisions. You have less patience, less empathy, more impulsiveness, emotions, mood, and psyche. Sleep is the main stabilizer of the psyche. If you don't sleep properly, the brain doesn't have time to process emotions. It starts to carry them around from day to day. Worries, resentments, and irritations accumulate, and you feel like your nerves are frayed. Any little thing throws you off balance. Chronic sleep disruption is linked to increased anxiety, depressive states, mood swings, and emotional detachment. You are simply too tired to feel, unable to focus on anything good. And these are not just subjective feelings. This is confirmed by research. The levels of serotonin and dopamine in the brain decrease with sleep deprivation. What happens to the body? Immunity drops. Sleep deprivation is almost a direct path to colds and infections. Weight increases. Sleep affects the hormones of hunger and satiety, ghrelin and leptin. Less sleep means more cravings for sugary and fatty foods. The risk of diabetes increases. Insulin sensitivity is impaired and blood pressure rises, especially if you wake up frequently at night. Your skin suffers. Less collagen, worse recovery. The skin becomes dull, breakouts appear, and hormones are disrupted. In men, testosterone decreases. In women, the menstrual cycle can be affected. All of this can happen even with a relatively normal 6 hours of sleep, if it's a constant pattern. And what if you don't sleep at all? If you haven't slept for one night, it already affects the functioning of your brain and body. After 2 nights, confusion begins, speech is impaired, and visual illusions may occur. After 3 days without sleep, hallucinations, paranoia, and aggression appear. The world record for staying awake is 11 days, held by student Randy Gardner. By the 4th day, he began seeing non-existent people in confusing reality. He then slept for almost a full day, but his attention, memory, and coordination took a long time to recover. Why doesn't catching up on sleep work? This is one of the biggest illusions, that if you go to bed at 3 today and sleep until 11 on Saturday, everything will be fine. But the brain doesn't work that way. First, you can't get back the REM phases you missed. They are not re-recorded. Second, even if you sleep more later, the disrupted sleep structure may not fully recover. Third, a sharp shift in routine is another stressor. The brain gets confused. Who are we? Morning people, night owls? Why is every day different? What if I sleep during the day? And who invented waking up in the morning anyway? Sometimes it seems, so what if I go to bed at 3 in the morning as long as I sleep until 11? The amount of sleep is what matters, right? Actually, not entirely. The thing is, sleep is tied to circadian rhythms, and they are attuned to sunlight. Even if you live in a city with curtains, your brain still receives light signals, and this affects the production of melatonin, cortisol, and other hormones. At night, certain processes are active: restoration, regeneration, cleaning. During the day, others are: wakefulness, reaction, digestion, concentration. If you sleep during the day and are awake at night, you are going against your biological clock, which means that melatonin is produced less effectively. The immune system works erratically, and your blood sugar and appetite are disrupted. The brain enters deep sleep less, even if you sleep for a long time. The risk of metabolic and cardiovascular diseases increases. Yes, the body can adapt if you work shifts, but it's still a compensation, not the norm. Even among night owls, the body and brain still prefer nighttime sleep. The myth of owls and larks. The internet loves to divide people into larks and owls. This distinction does exist. Each person has a chronotype, a predisposition to a certain time of wakefulness. It is partly genetic, but the problem is not the chronotype, but a disorganized schedule. True owls, who are genuinely comfortable going to bed at 3 and waking up at 11, make up about 10 to 15% of the population. The rest are simply living without a routine. Even if you are an owl, your brain is still better off when sleep occurs at night, because only at night is a sufficient level of melatonin produced. The longest REM phases occur in the early morning. Light affects the hormonal system regardless of your wishes. So, being an owl does not mean living without a schedule. It's just a slight shift in rhythm, not a ticket to a nocturnal life. In summary, sleep is not an accumulative bonus. Sleep is not a luxury or an unpleasant chore. It is the daily technical maintenance of the organism. If you don't give your body and brain what they need, they won't punish you right away. They will simply start to quietly fall apart. Your immunity might drop here, your mood might shift there, or you might make a strange decision and not understand why. A sleep schedule is not tedium. It is the language in which you explain to your brain that everything is okay, that there is rhythm, order, time, and peace. What do we dream about, and why? Dreams are like the brain's internal theater. Every night the brain stages a performance without a script, without a director, and without an audience. The actors are familiar people, imagined scenes, cats with the faces of colleagues, and former classmates flying on turtles. These are dreams. They don't ask for permission. You just find yourself in them, and that's it. Sometimes they are anxious, sometimes wonderful, sometimes so strange that you're almost ashamed to remember them in the morning. But one question always remains. Why? Why does the brain waste so many resources inventing absurd stories while you sleep? Why does the brain show us dreams? For a long time, it was thought that dreams were a side effect of REM sleep, just background brain activity. But modern research shows that dreams are not just noise. They are a useful and perhaps even necessary process. Dreams help us relive emotionally charged events, but without the risk. The brain replays anxious scenes to reduce the emotional load. It's no coincidence that you sometimes argue in a dream with someone you didn't dare to confront in reality. If sleep is the librarian, then dreams are the catalogs. Information received during the day is checked. What to keep, what to delete, what to connect with what is already known. And dreams are like the rough drafts of this work, sometimes strange because the brain hasn't yet decided where to file everything. Some dreams are simulations. The brain plays out hypothetical situations, tries out strategies, and looks for solutions. That's why you sometimes wake up with a sudden realization, that's how I should have done it. In a dream, the brain combines the past, the present, and the imaginary. This is an important process for our sense of self. Even if the self in the dream is a plumber saving the world with Julia Roberts. Why are dreams so strange? Because at night, the brain operates in a special mode. The frontal lobes, responsible for logic, control, and criticism, are suppressed. But the visual areas, emotions, and memory, on the other hand, are active. It's as if you put a team in charge of editing a film where there's no director, but there is an artist, an archivist, and someone with PMS. Hence the absurd transitions, sharp turns, surrealism, and outright nonsense. In dreams, people are not surprised that their grandfather is a dog or that the bus is flying, simply because the mechanism for criticism is turned off. What do we see in dreams, and how does the brain choose it? The plots of dreams are formed from fragments of memory. For example, you remembered someone from a summer camp, from emotions. Internal tension can manifest as running away from someone, from random associations. Cat, office, plus yesterday's argument equals you as a cat arguing with the accountant on a train. Sometimes the brain even uses external signals to incorporate them into a dream. You hear an alarm clock, and it appears in the dream as a fire siren or a drop of water on the pillow turns into a thunderstorm. This is called incorporation, the integration of external reality into imagination. Why are dreams forgotten? We forget almost 90% of our dreams within the first 5 minutes of waking up. Why? Because the mechanisms of sleep and wakefulness activate different areas of the brain. During the transition between them, as if changing scenes, partial amnesia occurs, especially if you didn't wake up during the REM phase, but in the middle of another sleep stage. Another reason is the lack of a logical structure. Dreams have no beginning, middle, or end. It's difficult for the brain to grasp a meaning. They don't fit into a narrative, and therefore are not saved as a story. Can we control our dreams? Sometimes, yes. This is called lucid dreaming. In them, you realize you are dreaming and can control the plot. Some people can consciously enter such states using techniques like keeping a dream journal, doing reality checks, for example, reading text and seeing if it changes, or setting an intention before sleep. Lucid dreams are rare, but they can be trained. They can be not only entertainment, but also therapy, for example, for combating nightmares, anxiety, or recurring scenarios. However, they also have a downside. Too frequent interference with dreaming can disrupt the depth of sleep. So, as in life, it's best to know your limits. What to do if dreams are disturbing? If your dreams are too vivid, anxious, or repetitive, it's a signal. Often, it's related not to your psyche as such, but to sleep hygiene. Overeating at night, a room that's too warm, sleep deprivation, and going to bed late, stress, coffee, alcohol. When you stabilize your sleep schedule and reduce the overload on your nervous system, dreams also become gentler. The brain won't need to shout with images for you to hear it. In summary, dreams are the brain's way of being itself. Dreams are not a mistake, but a function. Not a glitch, but a tool. They are a theater without a script, but with a purpose: to calm, to connect, to understand, and to preserve. And even if they seem meaningless, frightening, or silly, they are working. Their job is to protect us from the chaos that remains after the day and to return us in the morning not just rested, but internally whole. Too much sleep, when rest turns into a trap. We've all heard that sleep is beneficial, but there are mornings when you've slept for 10 or 11 hours. You wake up, get out of bed, and an hour later, you want to lie down again. Your body is sluggish, your thoughts are foggy, as if you never fully woke up. And a strange paradox arises. It seems you slept a lot, but you feel as if you haven't rested at all. This is oversleeping, and it's not such a harmless phenomenon. What is considered too much sleep? On average, an adult needs 7 to 9 hours of sleep, sometimes 6 if you have super genes, sometimes 10 if you're a teenager, sick, or recovering from a sleepless week. But if you regularly sleep for 9 to 11 hours and still feel tired, that's a symptom. And if you also go to bed late, wake up late, have trouble waking up, and can't walk past your bed without thinking, "Should I just lie back down?" then it's a different story. The problem is not just the number of hours, but the quality of sleep, its structure, and the psychological context. Hypersomnia, when you want to sleep all the time. Hypersomnia is a medical term. It's not just, "I love to sleep," but a persistent condition where a person sleeps for 10 to 12 hours a day, experiences daytime sleepiness, wakes up with difficulty, doesn't feel refreshed, and may suddenly fall asleep during the day. It's not always a separate disorder. More often, it's a symptom of other conditions: depression, anxiety, metabolic disorders, neurological issues. But most importantly, hypersomnia also disrupts the structure of sleep. If a person sleeps too long, the ratio of sleep phases is disturbed. The REM phase may be extended, while deep sleep is shortened. As a result, the brain gets stuck in an inefficient cycle. Why does oversleeping make things worse, not better? It would seem logical. The more you sleep, the more you rest. But in reality, the opposite is true. Here's what can happen with regular oversleeping. Your circadian rhythm gets disrupted. The brain gets confused about when it's day and when it's night. Sensitivity to melatonin and cortisol deteriorates. A feeling of cotton in your head, fog, and lethargy appears. Appetite and digestion are disturbed. The risk of headaches after sleep increases. Feelings of anxiety and helplessness intensify. Oversleeping can be particularly harmful if it occurs on a chaotic schedule. Today we sleep 6 hours, tomorrow 12, then 4, then we catch up. For the brain, this is like traveling through different time zones every day. The blanket effect, and why it's deceptive. It happens sometimes. You wake up, feel that it's time to get up, but no, It's warm, soft, safe. Just one more minute, then another. And now, half an hour has passed and you're not sleeping, not awake, but lying between worlds under the blanket as if in a cave. This feeling is familiar to many. It's even romanticized. But this is not rest. It's a state of pseudo-sleep. The brain can initiate wakefulness, but is not really sleeping either. This state is often accompanied by lethargy, anxiety, feelings of guilt and irritation. You are not recovering. You're postponing the start, and the longer this state lasts, the harder it is to get out of it. Some psychologists call this mourning procrastination. When the day seems too difficult, the brain chooses not to get up. But instead of rest, you get delayed fatigue. Sleep as an escape when sleep becomes an addiction. Sometimes, too much sleep is not about physiology, but a psychological defense when you don't want to wake up to reality, when sleep is the only way not to feel, when life seems difficult and dreams are easier and more pleasant. When the bed is the only place where you don't have to be functional. Such a state can be part of depression, or it can be just a way to avoid difficult feelings. It's important to understand this. Sleep should not be a refuge from life. It's about recovery, not escape. Why? Just 5 more minutes only makes it worse. Almost everyone has had this moment. The alarm goes off and you hit snooze for 10 more minutes, and then again, and again. And now, 40 minutes have passed, you're still in bed, and you feel even worse than if you had gotten up right away. This is related to so-called fragmented awakenings. Each time you fall back asleep, the brain starts a new sleep cycle. But this cycle doesn't have time to complete because you wake up again in 10 minutes. This creates the phenomenon of broken sleep. You might have slept more in total, but each piece of sleep is incomplete. And the end result is a feeling that you're wearing a wet coat. You can't sleep, and you can't live. What to do if you feel like sleeping endlessly? Here are a few proven steps. If you notice that you're sleeping more than 9 or 10 hours and don't feel refreshed, stabilize your schedule. Go to bed and wake up at the same time, even on weekends. Get up immediately after waking up without lingering. Add activity during the day. Walks, light, gentle exercise. Rule out hidden causes: anemia, hypothyroidism, vitamin D deficiency, depression. Make your morning appealing. A favorite breakfast, music, a shower, anything worth getting up for. And most importantly, don't be ashamed of your fatigue, but investigate with curiosity where it's coming from. In summary, sleep is a tool, not a refuge. We need sleep to recover. But when there's too much of it, it starts to work in reverse. Oversleeping doesn't make us stronger. Like an excess of water for a plant, it can lead not to growth, but to decay. The more stable your sleep, the clearer its rhythm, the easier your awakening, the more it resembles a support system, not a trap. Sleep should not be the only place where you feel good. It should be the place that helps make the rest of your life better. The border states of sleep. When the brain plays in two realities, sleep seems like a clear process. You fall asleep, you're disconnected, you wake up. But in reality, between these states, there are many intermediate phases where anything can happen. You might talk without waking up, scream, walk, see flashes of light, hear bangs. The brain is not a switch, but a complex network. And sometimes it's only half on. These states are called parasomnias. They are strange, sometimes frightening, but most often not dangerous. Let's figure out what these phenomena are, where they come from, and what to do about them. What are parasomnias? Parasomnias are conditions in which a person does something unusual in their sleep without being aware of it. This can happen while falling asleep, in the middle of the night, or upon waking. The psyche gets stuck between sleep phases, and in this moment, strange things can happen. Parasomnias include sleepwalking, night terrors, exploding head syndrome, sleep talking, false awakenings, and hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. In general, it's a synchronization failure. One part of the brain is already asleep while another is still awake, or vice versa. And in this transition, something occurs that doesn't fit the normal picture of sleep. Sleepwalking. Nighttime journeys without memory. Officially, somnambulism. This is not a myth or a movie invention. People can actually get up at night, walk around the room, perform actions, and be completely unconscious. Sleepwalking is more common in children, affecting up to 15% before adolescence, but it can persist in adults. It occurs during the deep sleep phase, when the brain is already turned off, but motor skills are still active. A person might get up, go to the kitchen, open the refrigerator, even start getting dressed and remember nothing in the morning. Importantly, you shouldn't wake such people abruptly. They might get scared or disoriented. It's better to gently guide them back to bed if it's safe. Night terrors, when a person screams but doesn't wake up. These are not nightmares. Night terrors are different. They occur in the first half of the night, during the deep sleep phase. A person might suddenly sit up, scream, cry, breathe rapidly, but not wake up. After a few minutes, they lie down again, continue sleeping, and in the morning, remember nothing. This happens more often in children, but is also found in adults. The mechanism is not fully understood, but it's believed that the brain releases accumulated emotional overload in the form of a brief shock episode. This is not a mental illness, but if it happens frequently, it's worth consulting a somnologist or neurologist. Exploding head syndrome. The name sounds terrifying, but in reality, this is one of the most harmless and strange sleep phenomena. The gist: upon falling asleep or waking up, a person suddenly hears a loud noise, like a clap, an explosion, a gunshot, or thunder, although there is actually no sound. This is not a hallucination in the classic sense. It is a false auditory perception caused by the auditory cortex shutting down incorrectly. It's not painful or dangerous, but it can be very frightening, especially if you don't know what it is. One reassuring thing: exploding head syndrome is not related to a stroke, a tumor, or anything serious. It's just a nightly loading error. Sleep talking is probably the most well-known and common phenomenon. Many people have at least once mumbled something in their sleep, from an indistinct to entire monologues. This can happen in any phase of sleep, more often during transitions between them. The meaning of what is said might be related to the content of dreams, or it might be just a collection of random words. Interestingly, the person themselves remembers nothing, but their roommates remember for a long time. If you talk in your sleep, it's normal. If you shout, swear, or scare those around you, you can keep a sleep diary and discuss it with a doctor, especially if it's accompanied by movements. False awakenings and dreams within a dream. This is when you think you've woken up. You get up, go to wash your face, make breakfast, and then suddenly wake up again, this time for real. This is not a dream within a dream. It's a false awakening. The brain models reality so well that you are certain this is it. It's morning. Sometimes this can repeat several times, like a nesting doll. It's associated with the REM phase and increased activity in the frontal lobes of the brain. It's common in people with anxiety and those who practice lucid dreaming. Hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. Hypnagogia is the state between wakefulness and sleep. Hypnopompia is between sleep and awakening. During these transitions, visual, auditory, or tactile hallucinations can occur. Visions, flashes of light, sounds, shadows, touches, a feeling of presence. This is normal. The brain is turning off control, but the sensory areas are not yet fully switched off. They can send signals that are perceived as real. This happens to everyone, especially with sleep deprivation, fatigue, or high stress. If it doesn't bother you, you can simply know that it's a phenomenon of a transitional state. If it scares you, it's better to regulate your sleep schedule. What to do if you experience any of this? Keep a sleep diary, stabilize your routine, and avoid overload, especially before bed. Don't eat heavy food or watch horror movies at night. Make sure you don't have sleep apnea, sleep deficiency, or constant nighttime awakenings. If it scares you, consult a somnologist, not a psychiatrist, but a specialist in sleep. Almost all parasomnias are not illnesses, but peculiarities of the brain's switching process. It's as if a computer screen didn't turn off immediately but flickered a bit between modes. It's not scary. The main thing is not to panic. In summary, sleep is not one process, but many states. Sometimes we are sleeping, but the brain is awake. Sometimes we are awake, but the brain is still asleep. Sometimes we are frightened by what is natural, simply because we didn't know. Sleep is not a shutdown, but a change of reality. And the better we understand how it works, the more peacefully we live in it. How to improve your sleep. Simple steps that really work. Sleep is not a whim or a habit. It's a biological function, just like breathing. But unlike breathing, it is very sensitive to routine. Sleep is like a cat. It doesn't like to be disturbed, have its schedule changed, be forced, or scared. Good sleep doesn't come on demand. It needs to be cultivated little by little, regularly, not by scaring yourself, but by helping your body remember what safety feels like. In this chapter, we'll cover the most important things. What to do if you can't fall asleep. How to get your schedule back on track. What ruins your sleep, even if you get 8 hours. And how light, especially morning light, affects everything. What is good sleep? Let's start with the simple things. Good sleep is not necessarily 8 hours. It's sleep after which you wake up without feeling drained. You don't jump up like a soldier, but naturally emerge from sleep. Signs of normal sleep. You fall asleep within 15 to 30 minutes. You don't wake up often or toss and turn all night. You don't feel tired in the morning. You don't suddenly fall asleep during the day. If you have problems with these, it's time not just to go to bed earlier, but to look at your entire daily rhythm. How does the brain know it's time to sleep? The brain needs a signal. It doesn't understand the word now. If you've spent the whole day in front of a screen, eaten at night, been stressed in the evening, and were watching a car chase video half an hour ago, sleep is triggered when light decreases, temperature drops, and nervous system arousal subsides. You haven't eaten for the last 2 to 3 hours. You are not stressed. If at least 2 of these points are not met, you may be in bed, but your brain is still on its shift. What definitely interferes with sleep? Light, especially blue light from screens, lamps, and televisions, late workouts. The brain gets revved up by physical activity, caffeine and energy drinks, even 6 to 8 hours before bed. Heavy food at night, fatty, fried, spicy. Alcohol. It might knock you out faster, but it destroys the structure of sleep. News, messaging, arguments, and dramatic TV shows. These things aren't forbidden forever. Just move them further away from bedtime. The brain is not a machine. It needs time to switch from attention mode to inward mode. How to help yourself fall asleep? Here's what works, not for everyone, but most of the time. A ritual. Have the same sequence of actions before bed. You brush your teeth, turn off the light, pour some warm tea, and the brain understands, this is it. A warm bath or shower 1 to 2 hours before bed. The body heats up, then cools down. This helps with falling asleep. Darkness and silence, or an eye mask and earplugs if it's noisy around you. Reading a paper book, not a news feed. Especially something neutral, not a thriller or philosophy. No trying to force yourself to sleep. If you can't sleep, it's better to get up and sit in the dim light than to toss and turn and get angry. Write down your thoughts. If something is spinning in your head, write it down in a notebook to let your brain release it. Sometimes a simple thing helps. Inhale, pause, exhale longer than you inhaled. This is a signal that it's okay to relax. The most powerful medicine is morning light. Here's something many people don't know. Sleep begins in the morning. Because circadian rhythms are triggered by light, if you wake up and immediately open the curtains, step out onto the balcony, or turn on a bright light, you give your brain a signal. The day has begun. 14 to 16 hours after that, it will be ready for sleep. But if you continue to lie in the semi-darkness in the morning, without light, without movement, your circadian clock remains silent. Want to fall asleep earlier? Get up at the same time and get some morning light, even if you have to force yourself. After 3 or 4 days, your schedule will start to even out. Sleep is not just about the night. What you do during the day determines what your sleep will be like at night. If you move very little, don't go outside, eat at random times, worry, and don't take breaks for rest, then it will be difficult for your body to switch off because it won't understand that the day has ended. Surprisingly, a 20-minute walk in the morning and a bit of daylight do more for your sleep than sedatives and melatonin combined. Do you need to go to bed before midnight? There's a myth that sleep before midnight is twice as beneficial. In reality, it's not the hour that matters, but the rhythm. If you go to bed at 11:30 at night and wake up at 7:30 in the morning every day, that could be perfect. If you go to bed at 2 o'clock sharp and wake up at 10 o'clock sharp, that's also fine, as long as it's regular and you feel refreshed. The worst thing is when sleep loses its rhythm, when you go to bed at a different time every day, when you don't see light in the morning, and you lie in silence for 2 hours during the day, as if trying to reclaim what was lost at night. A daytime nap itself is not the enemy, but it has its limits. Before 3 in the afternoon, no longer than half an hour, and not in bed. A short rest can be a blessing, but a prolonged daytime quiet often steals the night. Sleep is not magic. It is not a reward for fatigue or a punishment for a misspent day. It is a routine. If you want to sleep better, don't look for pills. Look at your day. Analyze your waking moments, your rhythm, and your evening pre-sleep rituals. Check if you feel safe when you get into bed. And don't scold yourself for a bad night's sleep. The brain is not a child that needs to be shamed. It is a system that can be recalibrated. Sleep is not a shutdown and not just recovery. Sleep is the basic self-support system for the brain, body, memory, emotions, and personality. It doesn't happen at the snap of a finger and can't be fixed by simply sleeping longer. Sleep is a complex, finely tuned operation that starts only when everything around you says, "It's okay now, it's safe, it's time." Over these chapters, we have traveled almost the entire path, from the simple question, why do we sleep, to the strangest manifestations of dreams, fragments of the unconscious, sleepwalking, and night terrors. We learned how the brain cleans itself, how rhythm and light establish our internal order, how sleep can be destroyed, and how it can be gently pieced back together. We talked about the fact that sleep is not a weakness, it is a biological priority. It is a way to remain ourselves, to preserve memory, not to burn out from emotions, not to break from anxiety, and to wake up in the morning as ourselves. Yes, it can be difficult. Sometimes sleep leaves us, sometimes it gets confused, sometimes it scares us. But now you know it is not chaos, it is a system, and you can communicate with it, not with persuasion, but with rhythm, light, silence, and the simplest gestures of care. Thank you for being with me until the very end. May your nights be calm and your awakenings gentle and clear, so that you can once again say to yourself, "I am here. I am rested. I am alive." Good night.